Hey, it is again the moment to go over what's going on with median sales price. Now, don't switch over and watch something else. It's important to know what the heck is going on with what's happening in the real estate market, especially for the Las Vegas Valley, for those of you who live here in Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, and in Henderson. So, what's going on with median sales price of a single family home in Las Vegas? Because this is important. Like, are prices dropping? Like, if you were looking to purchase a property, wouldn't you want to know if prices were actually falling? Like, is this favorable for you as a buyer? Or if you're planning on selling your property, like, wait a second, am I going to be able to get more for my property this year than I would have last year? I mean, that's important stuff. So I'm going to go over that stuff right now. Cool? All right, so let's check out what's going on with median sales price. Right now, for the city of Las Vegas, that is this blue line, we've got a median sales price of $458,000. Okay, well, cool. That's very interesting. But where were we last year at the same time in comparison to right now? Because right now, $458,000, $535,000 for Henderson, and $410,000 for North Las Vegas. Where were we this time last year? Here's where we're at. This time last year, Las Vegas, $480,000. North Las Vegas, $410,000. Pretty much flat, right? And then Henderson is at $530,000. Look at that. It's Las Vegas. Las Vegas has seen this biggest drop. I mean, we were at, what did we ended up saying? 480,000, and now we're at 458,000. Woo! That's not a good trend for Las Vegas median sales prices. And Las Vegas, it makes up the majority of the number of properties, as you could well see, when we end up going into the supply of properties. So what's going on with supply, right? Because everything's about supply and demand, and that dictates the median sales price. So if we were to go and say homes for sale, good indication of supply. This is the number of properties listed for sale. Las Vegas has the most because it's the biggest of the cities, but right now at 4,000. I know you're like, well, I don't care how many properties, like, what does this actually mean? Well, this is what's important, is the trend. You see the trend up? That means that we've got more properties sitting on the market, or at least available for sale, than we did going back, 2 years ago. But where were we this time last year? Well, we were about where we are right now. So that doesn't mean that, there isn't necessarily more properties that are going to end up being onto the market and sitting on the market, because the trend is showing us that more and more properties are onto the market. This just could be, hey, just January of 2025 versus January of 2026. What happens in February and March and April and May will soon come, and I will give you guys that information. But the trend is that we're getting more and more properties that are on the market, available for sale. Not necessarily so good to indicate a seller's market. So the fact that prices are dropping as far as median sales price for Las Vegas, and that inventory is trending up, gives us an indication that we are heavily moving in, if not already in, a buyer's market. But what does this mean as far as why are there more properties on the market now than maybe there were? Why are we trending up? Are we getting like a big influx of new properties onto the market? Well, this chart right here shows us what's going on with new listings. And no, we're not getting a massive influx unless you're going from, again, every year you're going to get the same trend from December to January. There's a big influx. And the reason for that is people are like, hey, guess what? The holidays are over. Christmas, get this freaking Christmas tree out of the living room and throw it out into the freaking, in the street, because we're in a whole new year and it's back to business, baby. Like, I've got New Year's resolutions. There's stuff I'm trying to accomplish, and one of them is putting my property onto the market to get it sold. So we tend to see an increase from December to January, and that's no different, from last year or December to January of this year. But we're not necessarily getting this massive increase of properties that's just, exponentially higher than years past. So, but the trend is that we're getting more and more new listings on the market. So again, if we're not getting a massive influx, then that's got to mean that what's happening is that properties that are listed for sale are just not selling. They're sitting on the market longer. So another indicator of that is going to be what? How long a property sits on the market before it ends up finding a buyer. Now, is there a metric for that, Pat? Absolutely. This is that metric. This is that chart right here. And you can see that days on the market, how long a property was put onto the market and then finds itself a buyer and then enters escrow. This is what this means. Because when you look at the numbers, you're like, okay, well, 38 days on the market. Okay, that means that a property was listed for sale. It took about 38 days for it to find a buyer, which means that the buyer gave an offer to the seller looked at it, they negotiated, and then they all signed the contract saying, okay, we're going to be buying the property for this amount of money for these terms, and then everything is in a sense sent over to escrow. So this is basically a property in active status to pending status. I know I don't want to go over all these little, technical terms and all of the stuff, but it's important to know. So this is not a property listed for sale and then ends up getting sold and the new buyer is moving in. It doesn't happen that fast. This is, again, listed for sale, finds a buyer, opens escrow. This is not sold yet. You got about another 2 weeks to 30 days before the property is like change of ownership. But the trend is this. The trend is going up. Properties are sitting on the market longer. That means that demand for housing is coming down. All right, we don't have as many buyers out there looking to purchase a property as we did before. So those who have their property listed are sitting here like, oh man, you know what? What am I going to have to do in order to get my property in escrow? I found a buyer. We signed a contract, and now we're moving towards, me transferring this property over to the new buyer. Sellers are now having to do what they need to do in order to make that happen, which includes lowering the list price, figuring out how to keep whoever it is that's interested in their property still interested in the property. So if a buyer sits there and says, hey, I want, a certain amount of money of credit towards my closing costs, well, it could behoove a seller to say, you know what? All right, you know what? I will concede at some level here with that, or I'll lower the price, or whatever it is. In order to keep that buyer, seller is going to have to do something, which means that if that's the scenario, who has the power? Who has the leverage in those negotiations? The buyer does. So to me, the definition of a buyer's market is who has the leverage, who has the negotiating power. And in this particular situation, it's going over to the buyer, not already there. So just keep that in consideration. One of the other things that I kind of want to touch on is for those of you who may not be buying a single family property, maybe you're interested in a condo, what is the median sales price of a condominium? Well, Las Vegas, it's $220,000. Henderson, $256,000. North Las Vegas, $242,000. Well, what if it was a townhouse? Well, this is a townhouse median sales price of $330,000, Henderson $343,000, and North Las Vegas at $318,000. So, fine, that goes over supply, demand, what's going on with median sales price, but what's going on with interest rates? Because if I was a buyer, and I need to borrow money, that is a major factor. What kind of interest rate can I expect to get? Now, granted, depending on your own personal finances is going to dictate, exactly what your interest rate's going to be, but generally, what's going on with the interest rates? Right here is where we've got what's going on with interest rates. Right now, they're in the low sixes, which is a huge relief as to you could see where we have been in the sevens and floating around in the sixes. But we've been trending down, which is absolutely wonderful. Now, for those of you who are somewhat familiar with, what goes on with efforts by the government to try to make, affordability a bit more accessible for, first-time home buyers and things like that. Donald Trump has proposed many different things in order to try to accomplish that. One of them being that, there's a big effort of buying mortgage-backed securities, which is trying to lower the interest rates. Now, we're pretty much flat. And we got a big drop right here. And that was right after that news ended up hitting that was the intent. And that is what's going to be happening. But we quickly ended up jumping up from there after that news ended up hitting. So exactly what's going on with these purchases of these mortgage-backed securities to try to continue to get interest rates to, come down. I think over the next several months time will tell as to what happens with these interest rates. And are we actually going to get ourselves into the 5% range, which would be amazing, not just for buyers, but for those of you who are holding on to, let's say, a 6.5%, 7%, maybe even higher than 7% mortgage rate. And you're like, you know what? I would love to be able to sit here and save myself a couple $100s a month. And I need this interest rate to drop, even further than where it is, if that's where it's going to go, so I can refinance and get myself into a lower rate. I'm one of those. So I'm looking to go ahead and say, hey, as soon as we start trending into the 5% range, boom, I'm going to end up contacting a lender to try to refinance a mortgage of mine. But those of you who are looking to purchase a property, one of the biggest things is trying to get your interest rate down. Now, interest rates are where they're at, but for those of you who don't know, you can buy your rate down even further. So if it's not where you want it to be, you plunk out a good chunk of money and you can actually get that rate down to the rate in which you want it to be. And that may be one of the things you negotiate with the seller. Not that you're going to go to the seller and say, hey, I want you to buy my rate down. The seller's going to be like, dude, I am not going to do that. But what ends up happening is that if you sit here and just say, hey, I want to buy my rate down, your closing costs are going to significantly increase for those buyers out there. So you could tell the seller, hey, look, I want you to contribute a certain dollar amount towards my closing costs. They don't know exactly what they're going to be for, but a savvy real estate, licensed real estate agent is going to know that, like, hey, I know what the typical closing cost is for a buyer at this particular price, and you're significantly higher than that. They're going to tell their seller, look, they're trying to buy the rate down. But look, in this environment where you've got trending prices falling for the median sales price in the city of Las Vegas, you've got inventory increasing, you've got property sitting on the market longer, then guess what? You may, as a buyer, be able to get the seller to actually give you that amount of money that you need in order to buy your rate down even further, making that property's mortgage that much more affordable. So keep that in mind. Cool? Now, we went over interest rates. We went over so much data. I hope it's helpful for you. I hope that you're getting value in this. If there's something that you guys want to know about or want me to dive a little bit deeper, please end up leaving a comment. Whether you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or wherever you're seeing this, leave me a comment. I need to know what it is that you guys want so I can serve you guys better with these videos. But for those of you who are looking to buy and sell a piece of property and you want a real estate agent that you can trust in the city of Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, Henderson, even in Pahrump, please end up giving me a call. Please. I can't help you guys save a bunch of money. Better help you through negotiations if you don't end up giving me a call. Plus, I'm free to provide you guys with tons of information, even if it's beyond what we just talked about. If you guys want to know, what the process is and all of that stuff, just give me a call. Cool? Otherwise, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.